Welcome back, everybody, to Nuts and Bolts Sports. Raj, Jordan, and Henry here. As always, we're here to talk about. We have a finals. It looked like, a few months ago, it looked like we were not even going to finish out this season, and the fact that we've made it to the finals is pretty incredible. Lakers versus Heat, obviously. I think we'll talk a little bit about that series here in this episode. I think we'll do a proper sort of in-depth discussion on it on Wednesday before we really get into that series, because we have to sort of backtrack and talk a little bit about how we got here. Let's sort of cover the timeline as linearly as we can, and so let's go all the way back to Saturday and talk about Lakers beating the Nuggets in 5 games. It was another sort of similar game to the ones that had come previously, where LA sort of took advantage early, and then Denver slowly chipped away, but they couldn't get over the hump. And as close as they got, they got it within 3 points. They tied it up at one point, but similar to the game 4, they were never really able to ever take that lead. And LA sort of, they were led by LeBron, playing incredible in both games, but particularly in that game 5 with the triple-double, being completely locked in and just completely taking over in that sort of zoned-in LeBron mode that we've not seen a lot of in these playoffs. Murray, struggling with the injury and whatnot, but him and Jokic did not play particularly well in those last couple games. I think you do have to give credit to the Lakers defense, although Denver did put up a lot of points. LA did cover their 2 stars very well, got them into foul trouble. It was still a fun series. It was still a tight series, and the point differential between the two teams was not all that wide, but the Lakers got the advantage with the buzzer beater, and then they, in those couple wins there at the end, they were just 5 to 10 points ahead, and they were able to obviously pull away within 5 games. Let's start with Jordan. First time in a while the Lakers are going to the finals. What you got?
It's been a decade. Great closeout win. You hit on all the key points. It kind of stunk with the Murray injury there. He played through it, and credit to him for having an incredible playoffs. And a great series against the Lakers. And I think that would have been probably a little bit more interesting fourth quarter had he not been so banged up with that knee. You could tell it was affecting him. Speed wise, he just didn't quite have that burst. But give credit to the Nuggets. They had a really great year. I think that if you would have asked, we pretty much did this throughout the entire playoffs. Every expert was saying that it was going to be Lakers Clippers. And we thought, looking back up to the beginning of this bubble when it was, Jazz were up 3-1. Raj and I, I'm pretty sure we both counted them out. We said, all right, it was done, cute run, but it's over. And they battled back not once, but twice against 2 very tough teams, including the biggest upset of the postseason. So they deserve all the credit in the world. I think they're going to be a very dangerous team for years to come, depending on what moves they make. The development of Michael Porter Jr., the continued growth of Murray and Jokic. The sky's the limit for them, really. So they're not going away anytime soon, and they shouldn't be. As for the Lakers, another good series. They played, they got better as the series, went on. Those games 4 and game 5. And got to give, you know me, I'm not a big LeBron guy, but give credit where credit's due. He was absolutely phenomenal in game 5. I think he sensed the moment, kind of with it being a closeout game, with AD being a little bit hurt and not being at full strength. And I think he knew that he had to kind of dominate from start to finish. And that's what he did. And he was engaged on both ends, I think, which was great. He obviously on offense, 38 points, dagger shot after dagger shot in the fourth quarter. But he was also engaged on defense. And he really was the latter, 3 or 4 games of the series, stepping up to guard Murray to try and slow him down and set the tone. And not only is it a good matchup because he's got the size and still has some of the speed to stay with Murray, but it sets the tone as like, hey, this is your best player. This is a guy who's going into his 17th year, and he's still willing to say, hey, I got him. Let me check this guy. That's a huge, emotional and mental boost for the team as well. So good series. I'm excited. I did bring a prop today because I know how much you guys love props. I had to stop and get this one. But since Lakers, they beat Portland in the first round. Everyone thought Portland was going to win. Everyone thought Houston, that all the numbers said Houston was going to win, all the analytics. Same thing with Denver. Everyone's like, oh, Denver might have a chance. Here are the Nuggets. Delicious. Don't get the spicy ones. These are the regular nuggets. They're not spicy nuggets. The regular ones.
Spicy Nuggets did not show up in those conference finals. Spicy Nuggets were there in the Clippers series. They were there in the Jazz series. They were not there in the conference finals. Those were the plain old bland Nuggets is what we got.
Plain old nuggets. I'm waiting. Those are cold. I'm waiting 3 hours to eat those since I got home.
Even better to fit the Denver mood, right?
Exactly. But overall, excited. It's really cool, the energy, to be back in the finals. And I really like how they approached it after the thing as well. The only wish is I wish they didn't touch the trophy. I'm a big, don't touch the conference trophy guy.
They almost didn't. They almost did.
So close. But it's cool. You have, AD getting his first finals, which I think is huge. LeBron, this is number 10, 9 out of the last 10 years. And you saw the way he approached it. He's sitting on the ground, really, he's been there, done that. But they all had the same. They all echoed their sentiments in the post game. From Dwight to AD, LeBron. They're all saying job's not finished, right? They knew that they still have work to do. It's cool to celebrate for a night, and now it's time to get back to work. They have, as we'll talk about today and Wednesday, they have a huge series coming up against the Heat, who is probably going to be their toughest overall challenge yet.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. It's just cool to be back, but job's not finished. 4 more to go. Let's go Lakers.
4 games is a long time. What you got, Henry? What do you want to add to that?
First of all, I was wondering the whole time what prop you brought, and I didn't expect chicken nuggets from McDonald's, but it's a very fitting for all this. But I mean, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. I think it's already commonly known that I'm not the biggest Laker fan, but like Jordan said, give credit where credit is due. The Lakers were incredible. LeBron James in particular was absolutely incredible to have a 38-point triple-double, to completely take over the game. This is what I wanted to see from him. This is the type of play, because I feel like ever since he became a Laker, his role became too passive at times. Like we all know he's still able to take over games, and I haven't seen him have that type of heat check for a long time. That I'm like, damn, he's still capable of doing this. Anthony Davis had 27 points, but he still had only 5 rebounds. So is that going to be a problem against the Heat? Maybe, because Bam Adebayo is a much more athletic center than Nikola Jokic. So there can be some problems there. But if LeBron keeps playing like this, I don't see the Heat making it past 6 games, honestly, because I think LeBron needed this game in order to prove to himself, like, hey, I'm still the man. I'm still the man in the arena. I'm the chosen one for a reason, and I believed it. I believed it, especially the way he was able to carry the offense on his back. That's something that he's gonna have to do against the Miami Heat, because he can't just solely rely on Anthony Davis to be the full engine on offense all the time. He needs to let it go of like being a little too passive, getting teammates involved. Because here's the thing: the Lakers only have 3 players that are averaging double figures: Davis, LeBron, and KCP. The Heat have 6 players who average double figures, so their offensive firepower is probably going to overshadow the Lakers. But the thing is, if LeBron can play like Game 5 LeBron against the Nuggets, I don't see the Heat, with their inexperience, having a chance against someone who has gone to the finals 9 times out of the last 10 times. So, Roger, what do you think of that? Do you think LeBron needs to play like Cavaliers LeBron in order to set the deal?
I agree with what both you guys are saying, and yes, I think that he does need to take advantage and really be the sort of dominant player that he was especially in that Game 5 against Denver, because like Jordan said, Miami is the best team that they're going up against in this postseason. Do you guys remember how funny it was back when they lost Game 1 to Portland? Everybody's like, Wash King all over. It was the whole fucking thing all over again.
Have your moment.
I said that too.
it's just like so dumb. Like, why are you guys getting? And now everybody's jumping on the bandwagon of the Lakers and being like, yeah, we knew LeBron was going to get here. Come on, we knew LeBron had it in him. No, you didn't. You all did not know that. Everybody takes LeBron for granted, and this is sort of what he needs to do against the Heat now, because the Heat are going to certainly be the most challenging foe that they faced in this entire playoffs, because the Heat have just been on fire in the bubble, but also matchup wise, you have Jimmy guarding LeBron, you have Bam matched up against AD, you have their young shooters who are going to cause problems for the Lakers defense that has not really been there up until those last couple games against Denver. Miami is certainly going to pose a lot of issues, and LeBron needs to come out with that same focus that he did in this Game 5, in Game 1 of that Miami series. I imagine he's going to, because the finals is a completely different beast. But those guys that are surrounding him do need to show up as well. Like, he can go out there and he can drop 35, 10, and 10, but, it's going to be hard for him to get those 10 if his guys are not making shots. There's a lot of things that need to go right for this Lakers team, and they're in no way out of the water just because they're in the finals now. And Jordan, like you said, also, like, they understand that. They understand that it was kind of proven in that championship quote unquote ceremony that they did at the end, where they didn't really touch the trophy. LeBron was sitting on the ground. A lot of these guys were like, they're still, they were quoting Kobe and stuff, like job's not finished, all that kind of stuff. There is still a long way to go here. And I think that this Miami team is going to pose a lot of problems for them. I think is the sort of main crux of what I'm trying to say. But I also want to echo what you guys are saying, and do give credit to the Nuggets, who I was championing throughout these entire playoffs, because they did show up. And like I said at the top here, those games that they lost, most of them were pretty tightly contested games, and even the ones where they went down big, they chipped away at those leads and they made it a fight in the fourth quarter, and that does definitely matter. for this young team where your two stars are 25 and 23 years old. You have a long way to go with this Denver team, and I can only imagine that they're going to get better and better and better. Nothing is proven in the Western Conference because of how tight and competitive it is. And if some of these other teams bounce back next year and come back better, which I imagine they will, like the Clippers, for example, it's not going to be easy for Denver to get back to the Western Conference Finals against LeBron and against the Clippers. I imagine that, we'll see what happens with Houston even. There's
Warriors.
Utah, Warriors. Yeah, Warriors are healthy now, or hopefully going to be healthy next season. There's a lot on the table for the Western Conference next year, and you're no way out of the water. Denver could end up at 7 and still be like a 50-win team in the Western Conference, but they proved something here that I think they hadn't proven to this point, at least for people that were uninitiated to the way that Denver plays and hadn't watched them a lot over the past couple seasons. So that is exciting to see. I don't know. Does anybody else, Jordan? Is there any of is the sort of pure joy like feeding out of you in any way, or is it? Are you kind of trying to like level it out because the job's not finished here?
Yeah, big leveling out. I mean, I was in Philly with some friends Saturday, and we had some drinks. We were celebrating. It was a good time. Like I enjoyed it in the moment, but like that's how I've been every series, right? Enjoy it in the moment. The next day, like I was already thinking about the finals. I was thinking like, what if Miami wins? I'm watching the game last night. How are they going to match up with Miami? If Boston goes back and somehow wins this series, how would that matchup look? Like I was already thinking ahead, and like obviously once we'll get to the Miami Boston series in a second, but looking at that, looking ahead already, like this, looking at the matchups, ready for game one. I'm excited, but like at the same time, not like over here in the cocky or overly confident. It's, you got to have a focus. And, for me, that means nothing because I'm not a player. I'm not a coach. But it was cool to see, like we talked about, those guys kind of have that perspective. Even the young guys, Kuzma, Alex Caruso, the GOAT, another plus 16, the plus minus. All those guys just seem to have a pretty level head about it. And that starts at the top, right? That starts at the top with the coaching, with your, with your star players on LeBron. They have a very veteran group at the top, which is helpful. And like you said, Miami is going to pose some problems. And we'll dive more into that probably Wednesday. But at the same time, it does help when you have the presumptive best or second best player in the world and another top 7 guy in AD. So at the end of the day, we'll see if that's enough. I hope it is, but we'll see. They got to still continue to play at a high level. They can't have any lapses. And give credit to Denver. Like I said, I think one thing you pointed out was important. They played hard for all 48 minutes, every game of the series. And there's something to be said for that because teams can roll over and just kind of quit in the playoffs, even if it's just for one game. And I don't think Denver ever really did that, even in the games that they lost in the first and second round. So kudos to them. That says a lot about their philosophy out there. That says a lot about their coaching, that they believe in their coach, that they're going to play for him, play hard. You saw that certain teams didn't play hard for their coach, and we'll talk about Doc in a little bit. But good for them. Like I said, they could be a 6 seed next year as a 50-win team, but I would still be pretty scared to play them in the playoffs because they're only going to get better, right? You have to think that there's 2 stars are only going to get better. They're going to have hopefully I would imagine a little bit of cap room with Paul Millsap not being there.
They're going to have to pay Jeremy Grant though after this playoff series. A lot
worth it.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, and he fills that Paul Millsap gap very well actually. For this
and you've been talking about Will Barton not being there. You'll get him back presumably next year, so they'll be back, and it'll be cool to see. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, what I sort of, to echo a little bit what Henry was talking about earlier in terms of the peak sort of LeBron play that we got, I think Lakers fans should be sort of thankful of Denver to push LeBron to that point where LeBron was like, if I don't turn it on here, we could lose these games to Denver and not get to the finals. And that certainly showed in those last couple games where LeBron, like a switch seemed to just flip for him, and he just took it to another level that we knew he had. He just hadn't showed us in these entire playoffs. He had been good in each of these series, but he hadn't been great. And this is when he was really, really great in the last couple of games. And I assume now that he's in that mindset, now that he's in that mentality, that's just going to carry over to these finals. Henry, do you have any closing thoughts on the series as a whole before we move on to the other one?
I mean, like these playoffs have been, they've all been, very unpredictable, but in terms of when I talk about experience and inexperience, I think that's going to be the difference maker here because LeBron has more finals experience than 27 other franchises. That includes, all these guys. The Miami Heat, they're so underrated because a lot of them aren't even lottery picks. They weren't even supposed to be in the league. Duncan Robinson, Jimmy Butler, their stories are incredible. So they were never meant to be great. LeBron and AD were meant to be great. So is that going to play, a huge factor in terms of like at the end all be all, is it the number 1 picks that are just completely going to take over, or is it the underdog whole of because something that I like about Eric Spoelstra is every interview he had post game, he would just say like, I'm trying to go celebrate with my guys. Like they're trying to soak this in because it shows they're inexperienced. They want to soak in that moment because this is the farthest they've gone in their career. For LeBron, we we saw him sitting down in the side. Like he could care less about the Western Conference Finals because he knows what the bigger picture is. So it's the mentality. The Miami Heat, they're dogs. As I quote Jordan, they are straight dogs. Great players all around. And I believe that Tyler Hero is going to have himself probably another series in himself. Duncan Robinson played great against the Celtics. It hurts for me to say that, but he was shooting the lights out. Jimmy Butler's the engine, no doubt. Bam Adebayo had 32 points in his last game. This team has so much momentum carrying forward, but is it going to be that experience factor that I'm questioning about in terms of is that going to be the difference maker? We're just going to have to see.
What I love about what you just said about especially Bam in particular, and that kind of transitions us into the other series, is what this Miami team has is the sort of mindset to take it all away from the Lakers, despite the fact that they were the 5 seed, they're the underdog coming into this, and those guys don't have a lot of experience. Miami just has that culture. Everybody knows that Miami has a certain culture. When you go to that organization, you work hard, and it does pay off. We've seen that time and time again with this Miami organization over the past 20 years that they've been to the finals multiple times. They've won multiple finals with and without LeBron on that roster. So they've proven to us that they can be here. And what I love about that Bam performance in particular in Game 6 and the sort of mindset and the mentality that he's in coming into that series is that you see like how he grows from the previous game where he was not good, and he went out and told the media, this loss is on me. I need to be better in the next game. He went out and then he did have 32 points in that next game and was, all over the floor on offense and on defense, was just spectacular and really sort of anchored that Miami win, because Boston was giving them a fight there. Boston was really, really fighting for that, and they could have definitely taken that game, and just sort of at the end, Miami was able to run away with it. And it is, it was sort of centered around Bam. A lot of it has been centered around Jimmy, but you just can't discredit what all these role players are doing and understanding their roles. Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, Andre Iguodala, again, show 6 straight finals for him now, right? It's kind of ridiculous to see what this Miami team did against this Boston team. In the comments, I saw that Joe was claiming his 6-game prediction, and I certainly didn't predict that Miami was going to win this game. I thought Boston was going to take it in 7. I knew Miami was going to give them the fight. But this Miami team is the real deal. Like the win against Milwaukee and whatnot was certainly not a fluke, and they proved it here against this Boston team. Boston has a long way to go. They're young, similar to Denver. I think that we're going to see them sort of contending for the finals in the next couple of years. Tatum is 21, 22 years old? 21. So like he's still got a long way to go. So this is not in any way a knock against this Boston team. It's just Miami sort of had the upper hand almost the entire way through. And I'm surprised by it, if I'm being completely honest. Henry, I'll toss it to you here first. What are your sort of feelings coming out of this series? Coming down from the high of the Lakers win for Jordan, what are your sort of thoughts on the Boston series and how it all went down?
Disappointed. It's I didn't want the season 10 this way in particular. I really thought we had game 6, but there were so many things that surfaced throughout the series that made me realize, okay, Boston is not a complete team. We are not a complete team. They're missing a big man. Miles Turner wants out of the Indiana Pacers. So my first thought was, please give him Gordon Hayward, give him Brad Wanamaker, give him any pieces that will make suit in terms of making a reasonable trade, because Daniel Tice, Enes Kanter, and all them, they're solid players, yes, but they weren't able to get it done. Enes Kanter, Daniel Tice fouled out twice in the series. You can't have that from your big man, from your starting big man, especially. He's just in there, kind of just filling in the space, and we need him to do more on that because he was only scoring like 4 or 6 points a game. So down low, there was no threat at all. Brad Stevens is an incredible coach. I don't really care what anybody says, even though he's been to the Eastern Conference Finals multiple times in his career, hasn't been able to advance yet. That's not necessarily on him. I really don't believe that. Like, there's just certain pieces missing for the Celtics that I believe they can acquire in the offseason, and Danny Ainge needs to make that choice as soon as possible in order to get Boston past that barrier that they keep getting, every single year. Kudos to the Heat. The Heat are an incredible team. I'm not surprised for them moving on to the NBA Finals. Duncan Robinson, all those guys that I mentioned before, they have been able to play with such chemistry that I think the most well-balanced chemistry teams are the Lakers, the Heat, and the Nuggets. Like, they really have like that going for them. Did you guys see that video of Jimmy Butler post game? He was wearing Eric Spoelstra's college jersey.
Yeah.
Like that's just love right there. When you have that type of star player, head coach love right there, It's the complete opposite of what Jim Boylan had with Zach LaVine. It's just the polar opposite. But that just goes to show, like, there's just a mutual respect right there that not only, goes far in terms of their off-court relationship, but how they trust each other on the court and during the game as well. So that's something that we were kind of lacking. Not that, I'm saying like, oh, Jason Tatum has a bad relationship with Brad Stevens, but we saw what happened in the locker room, all the screaming and stuff. Even though it got cleared up, it goes to show that it got to their head. They got frustrated. Miami never got frustrated. I mean, they're 12-3, so I don't think there's much to be frustrated about. But like I said, disappointing way to end the season. But like something that you brought up, Jason Tatum is only 21 years old. Jaylen Brown, I feel like this was his breakout season in a way. There was times where he was able to like take over games himself. That he really expanded his range. He used to just drive to the basket a lot more, but now he became such a 3-point shooter that he's put himself not amongst the elite 3-point shooters, but he put himself as a very reliable one. And Marcus Smart, I feel like Marcus Smart really needed Hayward to have that time off because of his injury, because I think Marcus Smart was able to blossom in such a short amount of time that hopefully this carries on to the next season where Brad Stevens is going to realize, hey, Marcus Smart is not just a defensive player, but he was able to drop like 26 plus points in multiple games. We can use him in that aspect a lot more. So obviously a lot of adjustments. I hope we get Miles Turner some way, somehow, because God, we need a big man. But I'm gonna take it over Jordan. Jordan, what'd you get out of that series?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of parallels with how the Celtics and Denver ended, right? A much better season than maybe people would have hoped for. Came really close to the finals, but still, they're not falling like either like a team like Toronto in the East. They had a great run, a really great 18-month stretch, but they're probably done. They're a little bit older. They have some guys that are going to be free agents. So I think they're going to be in a little bit of a rut and maybe not be at the same level. Boston, you have two established guys in Tatum and Brown who have gotten much better this year, as Henry said, and I think are only going to get better. I think we saw flashes of it here in this series, even though Tatum struggled with his shot and his shot selection, which comes with just more experience. I think that's going to change. But I thought his playmaking was improved. I mean, he had 11 assists in the effort last night, and he had close to double-digit assists a couple other times as well. So I think that's going to be an added thing that he's going to put to his game in the offseason. Jaylen Brown, like you mentioned, kind of rose to another level this year. He's such a great two-way wing for him. They're really only like a piece or two away. Canner and Tice just weren't going to get it done. Canner is good for one thing, and that's just rebounding and quick buckets around the rim. He can't guard anybody. And Tice, while he's probably a little bit better defensively, is a dud on offense except for lobs. And so that position was kind of a little bit weak. The big question with them is, what are they going to do with the Kemba and Gordon Hayward situation, right? Because Hayward, as much as it stinks, he's a nice guy. He's a good player when healthy. He's just never healthy. And it's going to be, no offense, it's going to be a recurring theme for the rest of his career. And it stinks that he gets hit with the injury bug. But I think he's just going to be missing, 15, 20, 25 games a year. And he's going to take forever to get his rhythm back. And it's going to hamper him, especially with how much he makes. So they really should try to do something with him. I know they won't because he's tight with Brad Stevens. And that's his college coach. But that would be an option there. You mentioned Miles Turner. I think Marcus Smart would be the key piece to that deal because, if the Pacers are possibly going to lose Oladipo, they're going to want at least somebody at the guard position to take over. And I think Marcus Smart, for what he brings to the table, which is like defense, hustle, energy, infectious energy, really, I think he takes away a decent amount too with like not always being the best playmaker. His shot selection, like he sometimes thinks he's Tatum and Brown, and that's just not the case. And I think like you can't have him shooting 22 shots and going 8 for 22 and 4 from 13 in a closeout game. That just can't happen. So they have some things they have to work out, but I still think they're going to be back and competitive next year. I mean, the East, as we know, is probably going to be pretty wide open with the Heat, the Celtics, the Nets, and they're going to be back. Who knows what happens with the Sixers. So we'll see what happens. But give credit to Miami. I mean, the hard part about Miami, I wanted to do the Jimmy Butler music again. I can't do it. I can't do it. They're in the finals. But I love Miami. If the Lakers had gotten bounced or weren't a good team this year, I would 100% be rooting for Miami. I'd probably have a Tyler Hero jersey already. They are just such a fun team to watch. I don't dislike any of their guys. They play so well, together, on and off the court. Like you mentioned, Hero wearing Spoelstra's jersey. He wore Tyler Hero's high school jersey earlier in the week. He's worn other stuff in the past. You talk about Bam. For such a young guy, he must be a coach's dream. It's for him to come in there. He killed his draft workout. Coaches loved him. They tried to challenge him, and he was like, "No, you're not gonna punk me." And then he comes in there, and as a young kid, takes responsibility for a crappy Game 5, which he was not good, but he owned it in the moment and came out and said, "I'm going to play better." And he he delivered. How many guys do that? A lot of guys talk and say that they're going to deliver and they're going to guarantee a win. He literally did. He was phenomenal for them, and he's going to be a huge problem for the Lakers in this series. And you mentioned talking about Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, these guys that maybe didn't quite get the respect in high school and college, and obviously based on their draft position, they're going to be tough to stop as well. Dragic slowed down, I think, a little bit in the series, maybe because of Boston's defense, maybe because it's a little later in the playoffs. He's still going to be a problem for him as well. So, I mean, they can go 6, 7, 8, 9 guys deep. You have Iggy making his 6 finals, and Iggy doesn't need to play like statistically well in every game to have an impact, but he always shows up like game. I mean, what was he last night? He was like 5 of something from 3. Yeah, he was 5 from the field, 4 from 3, a plus 20 in 28 minutes. That's what he does in big games. So they have a lot of guys with the sense of the moment, and they're going to be a really tough matchup for the Lakers. They're fun to watch, though. I mean, I could watch them play basketball all day long. I thought it was going to go 7. Boston, like I said, came within a couple minutes, and then Miami just did what they've done. They just put teams away late, and I don't think it's necessarily Boston lost it. Miami just said, hey, we're done here. We're ending this game, and they executed. So it's going to be a great finals, well deserved for Miami, and we'll see Boston next year.
Yeah, it's the thing that we've been preaching like for the past feels like month now, maybe even longer. They're just reliable. They show up. Everybody knows their roles. Everybody knows what they need to do. They're well coached, and the players are willing to make the adjustments that Spo makes in the lineups and defensive schemes and whatever it may be. With that zone defense, for example, that really stifled Boston. And you think about this, like also going back to game 1, like we're a Jason Tatum dunk / Bam Adebayo block away from Boston having the sort of momentum going into that series, and that could have completely shifted the whole entire perspective of all of this. But it just sort of anchors this entire conversation and what Miami does best, and they're just there. They're reliable. They know what their roles are, and Bam is gonna give you those blocks. He's gonna play well on defense and offense. He's gonna do all that stuff. Hero and Duncan Robinson are gonna go out there and have these crazy, ridiculous games. The one Hero game that I don't think we talked in depth about because we missed an episode on Friday, but it was like 37 points, right? He was
phenomenal.
Completely on fire.
You can't give those guys any space, none whatsoever.
It's ridiculous, and the fact that they're so young on top of all that, they have a perfect mix of sort of veterans like Dragic and Jimmy Butler who have been there and done that, and then Bam and Hero and Robinson and all these other guys that are young and sort of can lead the way. And Iguodala is going to pose some major problems for LeBron as well, because he just knows how to match up against LeBron in the finals. We've seen, we can use this as a sort of a mini transition, I guess, to talk about the finals. Like I said, I don't want to get too in depth because I want to save that bigger discussion for the next episode, where we really that's all we're going to be talking about, I imagine, on the next episode. So just sort of some brief thoughts that sort of came into my head when this matchup all lined up and whatnot is the fact that Iguodala has been guarding LeBron for 6 straight finals or whatever, 5 of the past 6 or whatever it may be, and has been doing it well. I mean, you think back to when Steve Kerr made the adjustment of the Iguodala lineup switch and how that affected the way that LeBron played. And Iguodala, he was so reliable guarding LeBron in those Cavs Warriors finals, and it made a major impact. He won a Finals MVP, for God's sake. Like, it's ridiculous. And you also think about the fact, or at least I thought about the fact that Spoelstra, if there's anybody that can slow down LeBron, it's Eric Spoelstra, because he coached LeBron for those finals runs in Miami, and he's also the best coach that LeBron's had. LeBron has not really gone up against a coach that he's had in the past that's a good coach. I don't think LeBron's ever been with a good coach other than Spoelstra. Maybe you could make the argument for Frank Vogel. I think Frank Vogel's a decent
better
coach.
than most, yeah.
Yeah, but Spoelstra is the only good coach, like sort of top tier coach that I would put in terms of who else LeBron's been with. Spo is going to come into there, and it's hard to predict what LeBron's going to do, but Spo's going to have a game plan, and he's going to know how to contain LeBron as best as anybody else can. And I think that's going to cause some major problems for the Lakers as well. I still, right now, I'm still leaning towards the Lakers taking this series, just because I think when LeBron is focused, it's hard to even slow him down. And slowing him down might still be him dropping 30, 10, and 10 as opposed to 38, 12, and 13 or whatever it may be.
Right.
So that could be enough to maybe swing the series, and maybe not. We have to see what version of Anthony Davis shows up. Is Anthony Davis going to just go and play back to the basket again and drop 28 points and not make an impact on the game? Maybe. I hope he doesn't. I hope he's still
starting with the 80 slander already.
I know, for real. I was like, he was pretty good.
In that Denver game, he still did not have rebounds until the end of the game. He still was not making an impact.
He got a sprained ankle.
I don't care. Jamal Murray was out there giving more effort than AD was. Like, AD was just wandering around, and that game was won because LeBron. I don't want to hear any sort of argument.
No.
Yeah, 100%.
Hey.
But chill, bro.
No, but I think that, I think the Lakers role players are certainly going to have some issues, like I said, up top against Miami. But I think this tandem, I'm going to give AD some credit here. I think the tandem of him and LeBron is a step up from the tandem of Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. And when it comes to the finals, I think that's enough to give them the sort of edge. But my opinion could swing by the time Wednesday rolls around after giving some more thought to this. I'll toss it to Jordan first. What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, we'll obviously get way more in depth Wednesday, but it's gonna be a series of matchups. It's gonna be like the Boston Miami series, right? It's gonna be a series of matchups. Who makes the adjustments on the fly? I mean, Miami's they had really good success against Boston with that zone in the last series. Boston really had a tough time figuring it out. LeBron knows that. I'm sure they're already kind of game planning how to handle it. They definitely have a little bit better of a opportunity against it, because with the Celtics, it was, sometimes Tice would be at the mid elbow getting the ball, and it's like, what's he going to do with it, unfortunately. Whereas this time you could have LeBron at the elbow, you could have AD, you could even sneak Rondo in there. It's nice when you have either guys with some size that can get to the rim, guys that can shoot a little bit, or guys that can just make overall good decisions. So I think that it's going to be handled a little bit differently, but it's still going to be effective. The Lakers shot, I was looking up the numbers, 2 of their worst 3-point shooting games in the regular season came against Miami. Obviously, they were a long time ago. So much has changed since then. You had guys like Myers, Leonard, Kendrick Nunn playing big minutes in that game. So obviously, we see how far Miami's come and made their lineup adjustments. But it'll be interesting. It'll be a good matchup. It's there's legacy defining stuff at stake here, right? I mean, LeBron, you could add to the resume. AD could start the resume. Jimmy could get, Jimmy should be owed a million apologies for all the slander that he's taken over the last couple years, because none of it is his fault. I never thought it was his fault. I thought he was in crap situations with crap coaches and bad players. And so I didn't think him wanted to be out and he wanted to be in a winning situation. That's all he wanted. So if they were to somehow win this, that would be huge for him. I mean, that would be like literally the ascension all the way to the top. Like, people should be writing him letters apologizing at that point. And, it'd be a great jumpstart to the careers of, Hero and Robinson and those guys. So there's a lot of interesting storylines, and we'll break it down a little bit more, come Wednesday. I got to ask, do you just wake up in the morning, like you go to brush your teeth, and you're like, AD does not make an impact on the game?
Yeah,
does not.
I do.
He's rinsing. Yeah, that's you every day. He's gonna have a big game in the finals, and I cannot wait.
Listen, I've been saying it this entire time that I've been slamming him, that I hope he proves me wrong. And he proved me wrong with that buzzer beater.
He's like the middle child for you. He just cannot please you. You're the dad that just like, all right, kid, like you have to walk to practice.
It just frustrates me when I see like a thing and I click on it on Twitter, and maybe I just need to stay off Twitter. Maybe that's my problem. And everything is just AD's impact. I'm just like, I'm kind of tired of it, but I'll stop until he has a bad game in the finals, which we know is going to happen because Bam is going to tear him apart at one point. I'll stop until then. I'll give you guys that much of a break. Henry, what you got? Block me from Twitter. No, thank you.
Timeout, Raj.
Yeah. I find that funny because the first thing that you said about AD was just like that slander, and I just find it funny. You just have that hate relationship with him, but you might love him in the finals because I can see him turning it up. The thing that I'm worried about for the Lakers, though, is what I mentioned before. The Heat have 6 players that average double figure points. So aside from Bam and Jimmy Butler and Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, Jay Crowder, and Goran Dragic, 3 other players that can turn it up offensively. I mean, I feel like Duncan Robinson is what Danny Green is supposed to play like in these playoffs, especially because he has 2 titles under his belt. He has so much playoff experience that you expect that from Danny Green, right? But he's been playing like crap. Like, I'm just straight up. He's been playing so mediocre that if he's able to play like the Danny Green that has been able to make an impact on the Spurs and on the Raptors, then the Heat are gonna have better. They're gonna have better matchups. They're gonna have better matchups to make adjustments to. Because right now I'm trying to think. Like you mentioned, Raj, you give the slightest opening for Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero, and they're a bucket. They're just a straight bucket. It's kind of amazing to see because the way they come off the screen and they're still tight under the screen, they're still able to make their shots. It just really shows they needed just a little slither to have that opening to make their shots. I'm trying to think of a player on the Lakers that can do the same. I can't really think of one.
There have been players in the past that have been able to do it, like Danny Green, especially like in those Spurs finals runs and whatnot that he was ridiculous in. But yeah, this version of Danny Green is not that version of Danny Green.
Green's hurt. I'm just gonna. Danny Green has a hip injury. He walks and runs like an 85-year-old man.
I've been watching. I feel like he's been running like that his whole life.
He's so weird. I don't know.
He's not a runner.
He needs to figure it out though.
He's not a Ray Allen type runner. Yeah, he's not going to go out there. but he definitely was more mobile. Even if you look back to last year when he was in Toronto, he was definitely more mobile then than he is now.
But that shouldn't be a huge excuse for him. He's not a I'm gonna take it to the rim type of player. He's a shooter.
Mm-hmm.
Shooters don't rely necessarily on their athleticism or their agility to get to the basket. They rely on their shooting. They get to their spot, which it can be helped, by setting screens and everything, which is something I think the Heat are running to perfection. The way they're able to set screens in the perimeter to free up their shooters, it has been some of the best, like most beautiful poetic basketball that I've seen. And like even though they knocked off the Celtics, which I hate, like you guys said, give credit where credit is due because that's just fundamental basketball right there in terms of just freeing up your shooters and the way Bam has been able to do that. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but every time that's not successful, Bam just rolls. He rolls to the basket and he gets an open lane every time. So that is Eric Spoelstra's system. It's incredible. It's weaved almost to perfection, but I want to see how he does it against an Anthony Davis, Dwight Howard type of defense, down low. But Jordan, I want you to think about this. Help me out here. Who are the best matchups for in this Heat Laker series? Because I'm trying to think. The Lakers, how they can go like 7, 8 men deep, and that are going to be effective. But I'm trying to think now. The Heat, they can go 8, 10 men deep that are going to be effective. Now there's going to be about all the role players and stuff. Do you think Kuzma is going to turn it up against, Goran Dragic and stopping Tyler Hero because he wasn't able to do that against Michael Porter Jr., who is not at that level necessarily yet. So, like I said, help me out here. I'm trying to think yeah, exactly, of these matchups. Like, what do you think? Who do you think, and the Lakers role players especially, have to turn it up in order to make sure that they're even keeled with the role players of the Miami Heat?
Yeah, I mean it's tough. Like you said, Miami's definitely got the edge. You look if you're like ranked like the top, like I don't know, 8 guys in this series. You're gonna go LeBron, AD, and then Miami probably has at least the next 4.
Yeah.
With Bam and Jimmy and Hero and probably Dragic. So, it's tough. Kuzma is at his best when he just cuts. I don't need him spotting up or taking guys off the dribble. That's weak regular season stuff. He's very effective when he cuts. When he puts his mind to it and he wants to play smart and cut, LeBron and Rondo and those guys find him and he gets easy buckets, and that's what gets him going. But if he doesn't do that, he becomes a spot-up shooter, and he's not a good spot-up shooter. So that'll be tough. It's really going to be it's going to be the big 3. And when I say big 3, I mean LeBron, AD, and probably Rondo. To be honest, like Rondo's been here, he's done this. He's played well in the playoffs. He's done the whole playoff Rondo thing.
He was very good against Denver.
Yeah, he's done a really good job. He knows what to do, and so he's going to be the guy, especially off the bench, because that's what he does. He's going to come in for LeBron at the 6-minute mark, and he's going to have to control the offense and keep the AD-led squad when he's kind of the primary focal point. Keep them rolling, keep the offense moving. Don't let it get stagnant. I think you're going to have everyone else is going to play kind of the same. I think the Lakers are what they are at this point. They're not really changing. It's just going to be a matter of whether or not their guys can hit the open shots. And play a little bit of disciplined enough defense. You know me, I'm going to put my vote in for Caruso. I think he's just going to be the steady guy that he always is, but he's not going to come out there and give you like a 25-point game. That's just not how he plays. So
can you see that happening?
No, I love Caruso, but it's not happening. He's too nice.
Not against this Miami team. Of all teams, maybe they could have done it. He could have done it against Denver, but definitely not against this Miami.
Caruso's he's biding his time till LeBron retires.
He's learning. He's picking up the skills.
Yep.
But yeah, I think let's save sort of the rest of this discussion for the next episode because there's definitely a lot more to dissect. Let's start with Depot. Depot expressing interest in possibly leaving Indiana, saying he's going to, quote, move on. This is an interesting thing because that Indiana team had a lot of potential, and they just fell apart this year because they were completely injured. I mean, they just didn't have any of their players to rely on between Depot and Sabonis. And yeah, Miles Turner, he's been up and down. He has good games. He has bad games. He's not consistent. He's not the player that we expected him to be. I'm just surprised that Victor Oladipo is not more committed to this organization after the couple of years he's given them and the success that he's had there in that short period of time. I don't really think it's a good decision for him to move. I don't know. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of offers on the table in terms of trades and whatnot. I just, for Oladipo's career, I just don't know if it's a good move for him because I think that 2-man game that they have with Sabonis is a good thing going in Indiana. I'm questionable about it.
Oh, same. Like, I don't think it's a smart move by Oladipo because if you think about it, before this, he was on the Oklahoma City Thunder. That was not a home for him. after he left, after he got traded from the Orlando Magic, he's been trying to find a home, and he found that in Indiana. He has something good going with Sabonis and Miles Turner and all those guys. T.J. Warren popped off in the bubble now, so what can he do next season? This is a good Indiana Pacers team, so I was surprised too. I was surprised, but I was kind of disappointed because I'm like, okay, Oladipo looked like the type of guy that's a little bit more loyal to the franchise. I gave him more of a chance in terms of finding that home, and he was able to do it in Indiana. He became an all-star. He's been able to blossom into the type of guard he is. Unfortunately, he had that quad injury, and honestly, I think I blame the quad injury for making this decision because it just prolonged his absence from the team that they've been struggling. So like now that he got back, he came back in a position where, yeah, they were the fourth seed, but they weren't necessarily a strong team because Oladipo was still trying to get back in the groove of his own game and everything. Because before the injury, we all saw what type of player he was. He was just blowing up himself. So the injury has a lot to play in this factor, I guess. Miles Turner is another great player that he gels so well with. So he has the right group of guys around him in Indiana. It just I'm a little confused, what might have happened or what else could have, transpired to make this decision. Jordan, what do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. And I mean, maybe it's one of those things where we find out like a couple months from now when he's on another team that, there was some sort of issue with the team or player or coach or something like that. But I definitely thought he was probably going to stick around there. It just becomes really interesting now, right? Who's going to bank, teams are going to line up for his services. You got to assume he's going to be back healthy. And you got to expect that good teams are going to line up, right? I mean, I would think like Philly could be one. I think Brooklyn could be one. They're looking. I mean, I don't know if I like Levert. I don't know if he's necessarily their guy. I think Oladipo would be a great fit them. I mean, talk about a guard wing combo of Kyrie, Depot, and Durant.
Oh my God,
that's pretty intimidating. We'll see like what Houston does if they make some major moves with Philly. Maybe something opens up for him there. There's a lot of different spots that are going to be open. He's definitely a good player. He hustles. He plays good defense, and he doesn't really try to do too much. Outside of his skill range. So it'll definitely be there. Same thing with Miles Turner. If he kind of goes in the block, you mentioned we are the Celtics being potentially interested as well. And I'm sure some other teams, I mean, while his play is up and down, I think if he does become consistent, he's a good two-way player, can space the floor. So he can, it's definitely coveted in today's NBA. So we'll see what happens. It's definitely going to be an interesting couple of weeks. Could swing some, could really cause a change in what our projected standings are for next year.
Oh, no, definitely. I'm curious if there's something sort of going on in the Indiana organization. I'm wondering if some of the players feel a little bit burned by the Nate McMillan situation because Nate McMillan was well liked there. He got the extension. He did a good job with that team, and all of a sudden he's just fired after this postseason. Kind of weird. Very weird situation.
Didn't make sense in the moment.
Yeah, it really didn't. And I'm wondering if there's something sort of behind the scenes that we haven't learned about yet that will start to unravel now that we've got the news about Depot moving on. I wouldn't be surprised if that does end up being the case. But Indiana has not really been like a very turbulent organization compared to a lot of the other organizations that we have in this league. So I'm curious to see what happens there. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of big names sort of on the trading block this year, not necessarily on the free agent market as much. So it will be interesting to see where he goes and what sort of situation and what sort of teams and situations line up to get Oladipo, because he is the kind of player that I think you can slot into a lot of different types of situations, especially after the past couple seasons that he had. And he could fit in well with a lot of different teams. So I think that's definitely something we'll have to keep our eye on. Let's close out with the Doc Rivers thing now. And just go quickly through this. Obviously, if you want right predictions, just come to Nuts and Bolts Sports, because we've been like on fire for the past couple of months here since the bubble started. I feel like we've gotten so many things right. But yeah, Doc Rivers and the Clippers mutually parting ways. This is after Doc Rivers obviously dropped another 3-1 lead, this being the third of his career in the playoffs. He had 2 years left on his contract, right?
2 years, yep.
So like. And, he's had a lot of the behind the scenes. He's had a lot of like sort of the behind the scene power with the Clippers organizations in the past, making moves, selecting his personnel. He's had a lot of that sway there. But this is sort of, he wasn't able to get Lob City over the hump. Now he wasn't able to get this team over the hump, and they mutually agreed to part ways. I don't expect Doc Rivers to be on the market for very long. I think a lot of people and teams like him.
Philly and New Orleans have already contacted him.
I also wouldn't be surprised if Houston is in the running as well. His son's there. They've got a good team. They've got a star. Doc Rivers likes to coach
No
stars.
state tax.
Yeah, we'll see what happens there. I'm not surprised by this. I mean, we talked about it. I'm not really surprised by this just because I think Doc's a solid coach. I don't think he's a great coach by any means, but I think he's a solid coach. And I think, like we've talked about, players like him. He is a player's coach, and he's going to fit in wherever he goes. But yeah, he just hasn't had that success with the Clippers that I think a lot of people wanted. And now that he dropped another 3-1 series, that's got to upset a lot of people. And Ballmer wants to win now. Ballmer put in the money to get Kawhi and PG and is trying to build a team around them. And Doc Rivers did not prove to him in this season. I'm sure they were expecting to at least get to the conference finals, and the fact that they were upset by Denver in the semis, nobody in that organization was happy about that, and it resulted in a Doc Rivers firing. I wouldn't be surprised if we get a few more players as well coming up soon. I don't think I've heard people speculating about Kawhi and PG possibly being on the move as well. I don't think either of those are going to happen. I think they're going to stick with those two at the core.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised if some of those other role players, even somebody like a Montrez who won Sixth Man of the Year this year, who's a key part of that team, I would imagine a lot of those guys are sort of on the market as well, and it's going to be a sort of reshaping around the quote-unquote 2 stars there with the Clippers. Henry, what did you think about this situation?
I think this can be a perfect situation for Victor Oladipo. Actually, when I come to think about it, like they got a good package to send a trade over there to Indiana. Let's say they put Patrick Beverley, Montrezl Harrell, maybe Lou Will. I don't know, or whatever decisions the Clippers decide to make, but they have good, valuable assets to send over to Indiana to bring over Victor Oladipo. Now, think about it like this: you talked about a KD, Kyrie, and Oladipo trio. What about a Paul George, Kawhi, Oladipo trio? I think they would gel pretty well together because Oladipo is never a me player. He's been always able to adapt to the situations, especially when he played there with Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook is more of a I'll do it myself type of player. He adjusted pretty well to that, but he's been able to blossom now in Indiana. Now bringing that talent over to the Clippers, I think it'll do good for them. In terms of when we talk about players now, when we talk about head coaches, I knew Doc Rivers was out. I just didn't think it was going to be today. I mean, when I got the news today, I was surprised. I was like, oh shit, that was faster than I thought, But then now it just goes to show, like what Jordan brought up, already the Pelicans and the Sixers reached out to him. So I think he would be a good fit with the Sixers, actually. Not necessarily the Pelicans, because the Pelicans are too young for him. He's used to, not necessarily molding players in terms of like in their youth, but he's like already established players that are able to take that next leap in the playoffs. The Pelicans are pretty far from that, but now I'm thinking, who is going to fill that spot for the Clippers? Who is on the market now that the Clippers, can potentially look at?
Oof.
Do you guys know?
I can answer that one.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 words: Ty Lue. He'll be there. I promise you, he'll be there. If you want, you talk about us getting everything right. I guarantee you, within 72 hours, they'll probably name him coach.
If that's the case, first off, that's a.
I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that was the first thing that everyone said was like Ty Lue or Jeff Van Gundy was the other name.
If they go in the Ty Lue direction, first off, you're burning Doc for one of his assistants. I think that's a low blow first off to begin with. And also Ty Lue's not going to take you to the championship. He's just not.
Oh no.
The fact that he took a Cavs team to the championship in his first year was a complete shock to me, and it was proof that he couldn't do it again because that team completely fell apart after that. It's not going to happen. Ty Lue, he very well might be. He's in that organization. He's got the connections there. He's an LA guy as well.
He's a player's coach still. He's buddy with everybody.
Sure, but if that's the direction the Clippers go, I might count them out in the first round of the playoffs.
The thing about Ty Lue is I don't think he's a well-respected coach. I feel like a lot of people, like players, look down on him. And that's like, I don't know if it's that small man mentality type of thing, like where they look at him.
He got stepped over.
Like, respect for him. The whole team just towers over him, and it's just like, if LeBron and that team were really willing to listen to him most of the time, what do you think? What do you expect? Kawhi Leonard, who's not as. I think that's the thing. I think the Clippers need a vocal leader. Paul George tried that, and then everybody rolled their eyes. I think that's horrible, by the way. Yeah, I think that was pretty bad. It's a bad look on the team itself. And then Kawhi is not. They always talk about he's not really the most vocal guy, but they need that. Who does that? Is Patrick Beverley? No, he's gonna spew random things out of his mouth that's gonna make him sound like he knows what he's talking about.
From
but
the
not
bench.
Leader is not the right word there.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So in terms of, I don't think Ty Lue can fill that role in that way. Is he qualified? Yeah, he's been head coach before with the Cleveland Cavaliers, Rodgers' team. But to do that with a Clippers team who's slandered so much and who's hated so much. I don't think having that on his shoulders will be very healthy for him. So I don't know where to go from there.
I can't think of any coaches on the market that are a good fit for this Clippers team because
Brett Brown.
No, because Brett Brown couldn't do it. And
really,
I think that he's already got so much slander on his back as is, and I don't think he's a bad coach. I don't think that he's as bad as some of these.
He's a solid coach.
He's a decent coach. I don't think he's nearly as bad as some of these these Philadelphia fans make him out to be. I think that was just sort of a failed system to begin with, but I still don't think he's the right fit to deal with Kawhi and PG. I really can't think of anybody. And the two names that I've brought up continuously as the only two good coaches I still see on the market are Jaeger and Atkinson. Those are the only two good coaches on the market, in my opinion. But neither of those guys have really coached stars to Kawhi and PG's potential. I can't think of anybody. I don't know, Jordan. Do you have anybody in mind that like stands out to you as a good coach?
I wouldn't say maybe not a good coach, but just like you said, a good fit for the system. But I think I just as soon as I saw Ty Lue's name pop up, I just think it's a done deal. I think it's been probably in the works for a couple of weeks, and they probably talked to Doc and about it, and that's why they agreed that he would part ways. They do that whole the PR spin on it, so they probably let him go. Yeah. I will give, before I go over Doc's faults, I'll give him this. Because I think he's a good coach, but also way more overrated in the national spotlight. Like you'll see, I saw 1,000,001 tweets from like Rachel Nichols, Justine Anderson, like Doc, great guy, like amazing guy. That's fine. You could be the nice guy in the world. You still have blown 6 leads when you've had at least a 3-1 lead in the playoffs. That is a glaring hole in your resume. I will give him this though. He is a good locker room presence. He is always taking control, and I'll give him this. I don't think there are many coaches that could have handled what has happened with the Clippers over the last, since he took over, right? He takes over and Ballmer comes in, and pretty much right away you have this Donald Sterling thing. And that was a huge, I mean, people forget how big that was. That was the boycott in the bubble. That was that for like 2-3 weeks with the whole
That's
Donald
a great point. Thing. That's a really good point.
And I don't think a lot of coaches, I mean, can you imagine like, Ty Lue or like David Blatt, like in the spotlight handling that? No, that would have been, they wouldn't, but Doc Rivers had the respect of his team, and he has the kind of the right frame of mind to make appropriate statements on those matters. He handled this situation here when we started having the boycotts and stuff. He was a very vocal leader with that, a very emotional leader in that. So I will give him credit for that. I will give him credit for him being a respected star coach. Like he does get guys to play with them. And his teams have done well. Let's not act like the Clippers have not done well. This has been their best stretch of basketball ever in their franchise history. Yeah. But at the end of the day, he's kind of like a Budenholzer in disguise. Like doesn't always make a lot of adjustments in games and in series, and it's cost them. And the fact that you've blown, like I said, 3 3-1 leads and 3 3-2 leads. That's a glaring hole on the resume, and it can't be understated. So I'm sure he'll be picked up quickly. Like I said, Philly, New Orleans already contacted him. I think Philly's probably going to give him a shot first over D'Antoni because I think they know D'Antoni. D'Antoni might be the potentially better option, but they also know that it comes at the cost of blowing up the team. And I think Doc Rivers, they might be like, hey, if anybody can get Embiid and Simmons together, it's Doc Rivers. So they might try it there as opposed to New Orleans. Like Henry said, they're a little bit too young and unestablished. So we'll see. Again, with the Clippers, I think it's Ty Lue, but I will give Doc credit for that stuff. But I don't think it was the necessarily wrong move to make. I think it also starts with the roster too. You have to make some adjustments there. I mean, some of those guys just did not perform. Harrell was their 6th man of the year, and he stunk in that series against the Nuggets. So they have some adjustments to make on their own, and I'm sure they'll be making moves and inquiries about Miles Turner, Oladipo, guys that could potentially help their team. Problem is they have no assets. They've traded them all for Paul George. Yeah. So they don't really have a lot to work with there, but they'll have to get creative. It'll be interesting to see what happens moving forward.
I will say this is a little bit off topic, I guess, but watch The Playbook on Netflix. This is this new series that Spring Hill, LeBron's entertainment company, put out. It's basically like 5 coaches talking about their coaching experience and their quote unquote keys to coaching. And the first episode is Doc Rivers. The series just launched last week, like mid last week. And if you watch this Doc Rivers episode, it's like 30 minutes long. You'll get a really good understanding of why Doc Rivers is like sort of well respected and why he's had so much success with the teams that he has. And it goes through that Clippers situation and what his mindset was going into all that. So I'll say that like that'll give you a good sort of understanding of what Doc would bring to a team like the Sixers, where you talk about could he bring those two clashing personalities together and Embiid and Simmons. Possibly, because that's enough to give me that series alone was enough to give me faith in Doc Rivers, despite the fact that I don't think he's the best coach on the court. The other question I had for you guys though was, do you think that the Clippers go with an established coach and established quote unquote name because they want to win now? Because there's another assistant coach who has been interviewing for all these big time jobs, has just not landed any one of them, and the Sixers being the biggest one that he might have dropped, sort of, between like what I've seen reporters discussing and whatnot. And that's Denver's assistant Wes Unseld Jr., obviously coming from basketball legacy, with his dad being a Hall of Famer and whatnot. But he sort of, his name has been thrown around each of these major coaching candidacies, in terms of the ones that are open, from Houston to Philly. Could he possibly, or that sort of type of coach who's an assistant on an established coaching staff who's shown that they can win, would that be a better move for them to go down as opposed to bringing in like a Ty Lue? I just, even Van Gundy, he's been off the sidelines for so long. Is he going to be able to make this team a win now? I don't know about that. But maybe one of these assistants like a Wes Unseld could bring that sort of fire that the Clippers need, and that sort of basketball mentality they need, that maybe even Doc Rivers was lacking a little bit.
No, I don't think that's going to work because of one big example, the Luke Walton example. Being the assistant coach for the Golden State Warriors, winning team, won championships and everything. It wasn't really accreditation to him. We saw what he did in the Lakers. He did absolutely nothing. I think aside from Ty Lue, he was probably the most hated coach. Goes to Sacramento, a new slate for him. Absolutely nothing. So that's just a prime example for me. I'm just like, okay, just because an assistant coach is part of a winning franchise doesn't necessarily mean they're going to translate that to their own in terms of another team. Okay. Now, when you talk about do they need an established and well-known head coach? Yes, I think they do. Can they look towards if Benny Del Negro is on the market? I would say go to him.
That's a deep pull. That's a deep pull.
You never
know. Tried that.
Yeah. I was like, well, maybe what can he do? But that's just in a scenario. I know he's not. But going back to your question, I don't think that assistant coach to a totally different team, different franchise, leap to a head coach where you need to coach two all-stars, two superstars, one that's not producing the way he's supposed to, and one who's not vocal. When those two things come through, and that's the thing about Doc Rivers. You know what? Now, to come to think about it, I think he's the most unluckiest coach in NBA history. No one expected Paul George to score 10 points in his last game. He's supposed to be a superstar in his own. No one expected Kawhi Leonard to have 14 points. Was that necessarily his fault? I don't think so. I think he's just been put in the most unfortunate scenarios and situations for him that have teased him so much that it's put a bad rep on his name. Now, when we talk about the assistant coach for the Denver Nuggets, what can he do? If Doc Rivers couldn't put this coach over the hump, what can he do that Doc Rivers couldn't do? I don't know. Or go the Vinny Del Negro route. I don't know.
Yeah, Vinny Del Negro doesn't even get calls to come to the old lunches. The only other name I could think of that I just thought of right now, and I think it'd be interesting. I don't think it'd be a good fit necessarily because I don't think he's a great coach. Jason Kidd's just kind of been muddling around for a while. And I think that here's what I think. I think Jason Kidd at the beginning of the year read all the papers that said if the Lakers go out 6-6 to start, Vogel will be gone and Kidd will be in there. And I think he was low-key waiting for that, and it never happened, obviously, because the Lakers got off to a big start. I look at Jason Kidd on the sidelines. He's the only one that doesn't do any coaching. He just kind of sits there. I know his back's been bothering him, so he's not really moving. But at the same time, I think he's kind of waiting for his big shot. He's obviously coached, he coached in Brooklyn there and in Milwaukee, so he's had some experience. He's obviously a well-known, respected player. I wonder if this would be a chance for him to coach crosstown rival, still stay in LA and coach in the big limelight and coach stars. I'm not saying it would be a good fit. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I still think Ty Lue would be my minus 300 favorite right now. But I just think it's Jason Kidd's right there. He's only, he only has to go to the other side of the arena to do the interview. It's not like he has to travel too far. So I just keep that in mind. No Vinny Del Negro. And I just think whether or not Wes Unseld Jr. or another top assistant would be a better fit, they're not going to explore it because they know it's win now because Kawhi and Paul George can opt out after next year. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. But that's just the situation.
Yeah, I don't like that, but I agree with you. I think that's the mentality, especially the Clippers, being sort of front-facing franchise now in terms of marketability and whatnot. I think that's the direction that they're going to go, and it sucks to see it. Feel sorry for Doc, not really, because he's pretty successful and he's rich and we're not. So that'll close things out. I think we've gone a little bit long, so that'll close things out for this episode. Thanks everybody for joining us. Like I said, we'll be previewing officially the finals matchup on the next episode on Wednesday. So come back and join join us then. And then later on in the week, we'll be discussing that first game and leading into the weekend of game 2, game 3. But you can find all our social medias down there. Be sure to follow Nuts and Bolts Sports on all our social media as